In the land of Canaan, Judah, the son of Jacob, had built a life for himself. He had married a Canaanite woman, and together they had 3 sons, Onan, and Shelah. As the boys grew into men, Judah, like any father, wanted to see them settled with families of their own. His firstborn, was strong and proud. When the time came, Judah found him a wife named Tamar, a woman of grace and beauty. She came from a respected family, and Judah believed she would bring honor to their household. The wedding was a grand affair. Music filled the air, and people gathered to celebrate the union. Tamar, veiled and dressed in fine garments, was led into Er's home, believing she was stepping into a new life of love and security. But things were not as they seemed. Was a cruel and wicked man. He had a hardened heart, showing no kindness to Tamar. Instead of loving her, he mistreated her. He was selfish and cared only for his own desires, disregarding the laws of God and the wisdom of his father. Tamar, though young, was wise. She noticed the darkness in Er's heart and prayed for a change, but his wickedness only grew worse. Did things that displeased God, things that brought dishonor to his family and disrespected the sacred bond of marriage. Judah, though unaware of the full extent of Er's actions, began to notice troubling signs. His son had become reckless, disrespectful, and arrogant. Neighbors whispered about Er's behavior, and even the servants in the household feared his temper. Then, without warning, tragedy struck. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, news spread through the household: was dead. No one knew exactly how it happened. Some believed it was a sudden illness, while others whispered that it was the judgment of God. But the truth was clear: had angered the Lord, and his wickedness had brought about his own destruction. Tamar, now a widow, was left in mourning. She had barely begun her life as a wife, and now she found herself alone. But according to the custom of their people, her story was not over. Judah, as the head of the family, had a decision to make. According to the law of Levirate marriage, if a man died without children, his brother was to marry the widow and raise offspring in his name. This ensured that the deceased man's lineage would continue. And so Judah turned to his second son, Onan. "You must take Tamar as your wife," he said. "It is your duty to give her children, so that your brother's name will not be forgotten." Onan nodded, but in his heart he did not like the idea. He would take Tamar, but he had no intention of honoring his brother's legacy. His selfishness would lead to his downfall. Onan stood before his father, listening to Judah's command. His older brother was dead, struck down by the Lord for his wickedness. Now, tradition demanded that he take Tamar as his wife and give her children in Er's name. But Onan did not like this law. If Tamar had children, they would not be counted as his. They would belong to Er's lineage, inheriting Er's portion of the family wealth. That meant Onan's inheritance would be smaller, and he would have less power in the household. Why should he raise children for a dead man? Still, he could not openly refuse his father. To disobey Judah would bring shame, and he was not ready to face that. So he nodded. "Yes, father," he said, but in his heart, he had already made up his mind. That evening, Tamar was brought to him. The house was silent as she entered Onan's chambers, her face veiled, her heart heavy. Though she had lost she had not lost hope. Perhaps Onan would be different. Perhaps he would honor the law and treat her with kindness. But Onan had other plans. Though he took her as his wife, he made sure that she would never conceive. Every time he was with her, he wasted his seed on the ground, refusing to give her a child. Tamar did not understand at first. She had done everything a wife should do, yet month after month there was no child. She watched Onan closely and soon realized the truth: he had no intention of giving her a son. Her heart burned with anger and sorrow. One night, as the oil lamps flickered in the dark, she confronted him. "Why do you do this to me?" she asked, her voice trembling. "You have taken me as your wife, but you refuse to give me a child. Do you not fear the Lord?" Onan smirked. "Why should I raise children for He is dead and I am alive. I will not let his name be greater than mine." Tamar's eyes filled with tears. She had been given to 2 brothers, and both had treated her with cruelty. Did no one fear God? Did no one care for justice? But Onan did not listen. Night after night, he continued his betrayal, acting as though he obeyed the law while secretly ensuring that Er's name would vanish from history. He thought no one saw what he was doing. He believed he could outsmart God. But the Lord, who sees all things, was watching. And he was not pleased. One evening, as Onan went about his daily life, a shadow fell over him. He felt a strange weakness in his body. His vision blurred, his legs trembled, and before he could cry out, he collapsed to the ground. Just like his brother, Onan was dead. The household erupted in cries of sorrow and fear. Judah was speechless. He had now lost 2 sons, both struck down by the Lord. Tamar, widowed for the second time, stood in silence. She had done nothing wrong, yet she remained without a husband, without children, and without hope. Judah, looking at her with wary eyes, began to wonder, was she cursed? He could not explain why both his sons had died after marrying her. And now, according to custom, she was supposed to marry his third son, Shelah. But Shelah was still young. If he gave him to Tamar, would he die too? Judah's fear overcame his sense of duty. He turned to Tamar, his voice careful. "Go back to your father's house," he said. "Remain a widow until Shelah is old enough to marry." Tamar looked up, searching his face. She knew what he was doing. He was sending her away, avoiding his responsibility. He had no intention of giving her Shelah. But what could she do? She had no power, no voice against the head of the household. So she bowed her head and left, a widow forgotten. Tamar returned to her father's house, carrying her sorrow with her. She obeyed Judah's command, living as a widow, dressed in mourning clothes, waiting for the day Shelah would be given to her. But that day never came. Years passed and Shelah grew into a man. Tamar watched from a distance, waiting, hoping. But Judah did not send for her. He had lied. He had broken his promise. Tamar realized the truth. Judah had abandoned her. He had no intention of fulfilling the law. He had left her to waste away as a forgotten widow, without a husband, without children, without justice. Anger and determination rose in her heart. She would not let this injustice stand. She would not allow herself to be erased, cast aside like a broken vessel. If Judah would not give her what was rightfully hers, she would take matters into her own hands. And so she began to plan. One day, as Judah traveled to a nearby town to shear his sheep, Tamar saw her chance. She learned that he would be passing by her village and she devised a plan. Tamar knew of a place where Judah would stop, a place where he often went to pray and offer sacrifices. She gathered her courage and disguised herself. Instead of wearing the garments of a widow, she dressed as a woman of the night, a temple prostitute. She covered her face with a veil and made her way to the road where Judah would be passing. Judah, unaware of Tamar's plan, was traveling with his friend Hira. He saw a woman sitting by the roadside, her face veiled, and he assumed she was a prostitute. Tamar knew that Judah would be too blinded by his desires to recognize her. She had carefully thought this through, and now, everything depended on her courage. As Judah approached, he stopped his donkey and spoke to her. "Come, let me lie with you," he said, thinking she was a woman who could be paid for his pleasure. Tamar, feigning the role of the prostitute, smiled and replied, "What will you give me in return for my services?" Judah, not recognizing her, offered a young goat from his flock as payment. Tamar, knowing that Judah could not send her the goat immediately, asked him for a pledge, a symbol of his commitment. She asked for his signet ring, cord, and staff. These were personal items that only Judah would have, and he agreed without hesitation, thinking it was a small price to pay for the pleasure he sought. They lay together that night, and when the deed was done, Judah left, promising to send the goat as payment later. Tamar, now with the items she needed, returned to her father's house, hiding her actions from all. Time passed, and Judah soon sent the goat with his friend Hira to retrieve the signet ring, cord, and staff as promised. But when Hira arrived in the town, he searched for the woman, asking the locals, but no one knew of any temple prostitute by the road. The woman had vanished without a trace. Judah, unaware that the woman he had slept with was Tamar, was embarrassed. He decided to leave the matter be and forget about it, thinking he would simply lose the items. However, months later, word came to Judah that Tamar was pregnant. She had been with a man, and the people in the village began to gossip. Judah, shocked and angry, ordered that she be brought to him so she could be punished. When Tamar arrived, she revealed the truth. She was pregnant by the man who owned the signet ring, cord, and staff, the very items she had taken from Judah that night. She sent these items to him as proof. Judah's heart sank as he realized the woman before him was Tamar, his daughter-in-law. He had wronged her, neglected her, and refused to honor his promise. Now she was carrying his own child. A deep shame filled Judah's soul. He knew that Tamar had acted not out of selfishness, but out of the desire for justice. He had failed her, and now she was carrying his heir. With great humility, Judah confessed, saying, "She is more righteous than I." In that moment, Judah recognized his own fault. He had failed to provide for Tamar, and his son's wickedness had led to this tragedy. He promised to honor her and ensure that her child would not be forgotten. Tamar's bravery had brought justice, and she gave birth to twins, Perez and Zerah, whose names would live on in the history of Israel. From that day forward, Judah understood the value of his word, and Tamar, the forgotten widow, became the mother of a new generation. Thus, the story of Onan, Tamar, and Judah came to an end, leaving behind lessons of justice, responsibility, and the unbreakable will of those who seek to right the wrongs of the world. If you enjoy this Bible story and want more stories like this, click the subscribe button and comment the best part of the story you liked. Thank you.